We are live. See, told you it went quickly, everybody. Let's welcome to the historical crime panel of Winterfest. Let's start off with you all introducing yourselves and your books. We'll start with Guy at the bottom.
Hi there. Well, my name's Guy Gardner. I've written 2 books that I own up to. I wrote quite a few over the years in the run-up to that sort of never made it because they're pretty awful, but there's 2 actually out there now. So I sort of swap my time between writing quite a lot now. I'm still doing as much as possible, especially over Christmas, and being a musician, being a piano teacher. And the 2 things sort of go hand in hand for me, really. I really enjoy doing it. The writing helps the music and the music helps the writing, sort of thing. And I've been writing since about 2006 I sort of started, but it was only comparatively recently, 2018, sort of actually got something published. That's me, really.
Nice, you didn't tell us the name of your books.
Oh, the first one, no, I didn't. I'm really bad at that. You'll have to remind me because I'm just horrendous. The first one was called The Mirror Game, which was, I'm good at settings. I can tell you when the setting and the time, and that's about it. But the first one was A Mirror Game. It was basically a detective sort of crime novel set in 20s London. The second one is called The Apprentice Thief, and that's set a bit earlier in the 1890s, which is it's sort of a little bit crimey, but also coming of age story.
Tania, do you want to introduce yourself next?
Yeah, so similar to Guy, I've got some 1920s mysteries. There must be something about the 1920s that are just particularly appealing. So I started off with the Charles Fort historical mysteries, again about 2017-18. And there's 3 of them, and then there's a spin-off series featuring one of the other characters. So there's 5 books altogether, all set in the 1920s. So that's my kind of area of expertise. I don't know if I could go any earlier, but I can just about manage 100 years ago.
Nice, Chris. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, my name's Chris Speck. I'm a writer from Hull. Originally, I write stories about seafaring tales, and I fell down a sort of historical fiction hole for about 3 years, and ended up writing 3 books about East Yorkshire and about Dick Turpin, and lots of highwaymen, and set in 1709 to about 1740. I really love the time period, but I've done 3 books about that, starting with this one, The Great Frost. And I've done 3 of those now, and it's the end of the trilogy, so I'm back to writing crime fiction about Hull, really. But I do enjoy writing a bit of crime fiction, and the 1920s is a great time, guys, to write. Lots of things going on. So that's me. Yeah, I've written quite a few books now. The North Burton trilogy there, set in the early part of the 18th century, and my other stories about Hull, set on the sea, and also in the gangland taxi office as well.
None of them are modern, though, are they, yours? I don't even have a new cars. It's not quite completely.
Yes, it's supposed to be around now, yeah. Maybe a few years ago, but yeah, it's. I tried to make it modern, but yeah, there's that old feel to it.
So why have you? We'll start easy. We'll lure you into the thing. Why did you choose your particular time period to write in? What drew you to that particular era?
Well, for me, the first one set in the 20s. Probably. Well, the first thing is that it was like quite a glamorous time. I think that's what drew me into it, because I love the idea of London at that time, and again, I talk about music, the music that would have been going on. That sort of drew me in, the sort of imagery of it, I suppose. And then I think after that, when I started thinking about story and what would happen, I got quite into the idea of, it was quite a dark time. So although those the sort of jazz age, so I did jazz hands, so I can't help it. That it was only sort of just after the First World War, and no one really knew what would happen. after that, and there was a genuine and real fear that things would go back to this barbaric kind of age, that the people that had come back from the First World War would have been changed by the violence and wouldn't be able to sort of fit into society. And it was quite a sort of real fear, and also that there was like to be a sort of Second World War. So that darkness probably sort of drew me in and, kind of held me there a little bit. It's just a really interesting time, and I think, I suppose you get sucked into whatever time you write in, don't you? And there's things about it that really drew you in. But for that first one, yeah, the element that I liked was that, things not quite. Obviously, there was not much technology. But yeah, it was that post-war period, and people were trying to celebrate, trying to have a good time. But it was a dark time, and I love that. And there's lots of possibilities there for stories. It's a sort of gold mine, really. That was that for me, definitely.
Yeah, I would definitely agree as a fellow 1920s fan. I think a lot of us grew up reading Agatha Christie, if we're crime fans, so obviously they're set in the 20s. And there is that attraction of, there's a lot of wealth all of a sudden, but obviously it's come from a place of darkness. It's come from the First World War. Yeah. So yeah, mine are kind of more on the cozy end. So I guess I'm focusing more on that kind of the sort of Art Deco kind of fun and games more than anything else. But yeah, definitely it's good for the crime writer. You've got the darkness and the light at the same time.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, the early part of the 18th century, like 1709, is it sort of a dark time, really? I mean, I didn't know anything about it, really, when I started writing about it. I didn't know anything about the clothes people wore or, the history of the time period. But actually, it's a really vital piece of the jigsaw that makes Britain. And what I particularly love is the technology they had back then. I've got my big pistol here. My flintlock pistol. It's not real. It's not. Kaz, don't worry. It's not real.
Bang.
But and I love the technology back then, because to the people at the time, this would have been like a really good bit of kit, and this would have been an amazing piece of equipment. Even though it would misfire, you have to load it with a muzzle. If it's raining, it won't work. You use the end to club to hit someone if you run out of bullets. So the technology is really, really good. I like that, and the things they've got, like in the last book, I talk about windmills a lot, and it occurred to me that windmills would have been an amazing technological feat back in 1720. Whereas now we sort of think, okay, it's a windmill, but back then it was like, this is cutting edge technology, and so and you can really tell a good story, I think, probably in the 1920s too, when there is no cameras. And there are no mobile phones, and so people can just do things and run away, and no one will know about it.
Yeah.
If you're a modern crime writer, it must be really difficult to write about how people get away with crimes when there's so many cameras and phones and police and surveillance. So historical crime is the way forward. I think it's a lot easier to fit the story together.
It's a lot harder to work out who's done it though when there's no forensics, isn't it?
That's very true. Yes, it could be anyone.
I'm not sure if that's making the argument any less so for writing in history, but I mean, there is that challenge. How do you solve the crime? Because you don't have like the police procedures and things to follow. How do you go around
that's true.
Finding it? Did you find that a problem when you were all writing, or?
It seemed to me that, the way mine developed was it was just like constant asking of questions, which I suppose would have been the main thing, and probably sort of trying to catch people out in a way, being like my sort of character. He's sort of quite observant of the way people act, so I think you had to be a lot more in tune, because there's almost like nothing else to go on, and looking for bits of evidence, but obviously there's no DNA or anything like that. But there was still evidence. But yeah, you had to go out and root around till you find it. I mean, there's one scene where my guy Harry sort of finds a bottle buried in the sort of undergrowth, and there's still a faint smell of whiskey about it, and so he traces that back, like where was it made? So I guess maybe in some ways it's not that different from today, but it's just quite, but it's quite raw, isn't it? You just got to go with what I've got this bottle, right? I've got to go around and find who made it, so I go from there rather than sort of send it to a lab or anything else. But I really enjoyed that, and I found that again sort of fueled the story. I mean, that's another reason that I like writing that time, because everything had to be done on foot. And if you said you were going to be somewhere on Tuesday, well, you had to be there. That was it. Yeah, but I think it's tricky. You've got to get those details right. But I think it was down to really talking to people and maybe having a network of people that you knew that could sort of help, that knew, in my case, sort of London, who's likely to be doing what at what time,
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I think the 1920s is really the start of modern forensics. So we probably have life a bit easier than writing in the 18th century. So there is things like fingerprints, and there's things they can do. They had detectives and things. One of my books features the first female police officer and stuff like that. So it's not that different. I guess they just don't have quite as good science as we have now. But certainly if you think about like the Agatha Christie books, they can identify poisons, they can tell how people died, you can test for arsenic and things. So yeah, I think maybe we have life a bit easier than you do if you're writing stuff earlier on, I think.
Well, I mean, I don't have that sort of, the detective character who solves the crime, basically. Mine's more sort of gangland thing. So when people are killed, it's usually fairly obvious who killed them, and the reader knows anyway. So that's how I get around it. They don't have a detective as such. But how about the research, guys? How did you find that? Did you research before you write, or do you research as you write?
I'm quite bad. I tend to, because I like character and I like story, I tend to write first and then hope that it sort of pans out when it comes to it and I haven't made some massive botch. I do research, but I find that if I do too much, you can almost get to that thing where you're like really keen. You want the reader to know how much you know, and then that can probably make for a very dull read. So I try and do, I say the minimum sounds bad, but I try and do what I can do to get into the story, and then I fill it in as I sort of go, or I go back at the end, and do another sort of draft and, go over those bits that, well, that clearly wouldn't have worked because they didn't have that. Or so I sort of do it like that. I'm not one for getting a book or research, because I find it gets in the way of the story a bit. So I sort of do it sort of piecemeal. Not very professional, really, but that's how
I think it is. I think that's the way to do it, mate, to be honest.
Yeah, I'd agree. I had a bit of a nightmare for my last historical book, which was, I thought, okay, I'll send them on the cruise around Northern Europe because most of it was neutral anyway. So I was like, it'll be fine, it won't be complicated. Well, so I'd set it in 1925. For 1 year in 1925, also is called Christiana. Right. And it just changed the whole book once I started doing this research. And I realized actually I didn't know anything about Northern Europe in 1925. Although a lot of it was neutral in the First World War, there was huge ramifications for these countries. So sometimes you do have to do a lot of research. I try to keep it at a minimum, but that was a bit of an error. I ended up doing a lot more research than I had wanted to. But again, because it's 1920s, there's a lot of information out there. So there's photographs of what the cities looked like in 1920s and things, which I guess, again, you don't have for the 18th century.
No. We got paintings.
Yeah, you got paintings, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, I downloaded, to get into the sort of mood a bit, I downloaded quite a lot of paintings of, 1920s London and Victorian London, just to get into that sort of vibe. And I found that really helped because of the light as well. The light's different. And getting that, it was like this little sort of way in every time I did it. So look at a few sort of paintings, and it really sort of draws you into that world. I kind of really enjoy that. I don't know if you've done that, but
but I'm going to steal that. That's a great idea.
Yeah. I really recommend it. Yeah. It really helped. And sometimes with a painting, you've got that slight artistic license, which helps a bit, just sort of blur those lines, and get into it. So yeah, top tip.
Yeah, paintings are great. I research as I go, like you do, Guy. And I don't really research beforehand. And then it informs the book as I write it, really.
Yeah.
I've got a really good friend who's a doctor of like 18th century history, and I just chat to him a lot, and he tells me all sorts of stories and things, and so and you know, it bleeds through into the story. Do you have like a historical expert look at your book and go, all right, well, that wouldn't have happened. They wouldn't have said that.
No, I've never done that.
He wouldn't be wearing that.
I'm not brave enough to do that.
No, I wait for the reviews to tell me if I've got anything wrong.
I avoided a big blooper in my last one. I had one of my characters like looking out of a window into the street of people. He's looking for his mother, and she's Indian, so she'll be wearing a sari, so she really sort of stand out. And I made some mention of the dresses of the time, people walking about in bustles, and I really liked it. Kind of really good image. And then something just pinged. I thought I better just check that. And the year before, bustles went out of fashion, so no one would have been wearing them, you know. And I was like, right, okay. And it would have been those like mutton sleeve dresses. So that was like a bit of a lesson. I thought I'd better check some of this. You know, you can just assume, you know, but someone, that's the sort of error that someone would go, well, you know, that's not right. And the thing is, it's not even that, is it? Is that if you have something like that, it sort of takes the reader out of it a bit if they do suss that, you know. So
do you bend historical facts sometimes as well, and sort of change them, and like things that that didn't happen happened in your book?
I'm trying to think. I don't know if I've ever had to. I probably would, but it'd be fine, wouldn't it? Who really knows anyway?
I've got a real life character. So the main character in my book is Charles Fort, the guy who Fortean is named after.
Right.
So I do have to bend his life a little bit because obviously he wasn't solving crimes. So yeah, I definitely have to bend things a little bit. But I try and keep the major like historical things the same.
Yeah.
I mean, I bend history totally. I mean, I've got Dick Turpin being born in East Yorkshire, in where I grew up in Cherry Burton. He wasn't born there.
Yeah.
And I also get him to survive his own death, which is, you know, not allowed really.
Yeah.
So yeah, I bend loads and loads of historical facts, and I enjoy it, to be honest.
Yeah.
And in my last one, I had a very young Dick Turpin in my book, The Crown, my Christmas special. A young Dick Turpin at 17, he invents Yorkshire puddings. That's not true. But he invented Yorkshire puddings in Skidby Mill pub just around the corner, which is famous for Yorkshire puddings, and he did that in 1721 on Christmas Eve.
Excellent.
Have you ever been picked up on that though, bending your historical fact?
Yeah, loads. Yeah, I get told off by a few people, and I say, "Well, I'm a fiction writer, you know."
Yeah. But that's true, isn't it? I mean, it's obviously we don't want to, you know, we're not going crazy and sort of having like machine guns, but it is entertainment, isn't it? And
yeah,
you know, it's, I think that you can bend it to quite some degree. Yeah, I think it's okay. I definitely would. I'd have no qualms.
Yeah, I think as well, I want things to fit. I write cozies, so I want them to be a little more nicer than they maybe were in real life. So basically, everyone in the 1920s was hugely anti-Semitic. They just were. If you read anything from the time, they were. My characters are not. So there's things like that I do definitely tend to kind of blunt some of the edges a bit from the time period.
Absolutely, for sure. If you wrote as the characters would have been back then, I mean, like if I was writing about an 18th century character, they'd be uneducated, they'd be extremely racist, they'd be like really quite horrible people. So I have to make them a bit modern so people will like them. And so we're all bending the truth, really.
Yeah. And same with the way people spoke as well. You know, you can, if you actually wrote, it'd be almost hard to understand. So you have to kind of try and modernize it a bit without completely making it crazy. But it was good in the one set earlier, The Apprentice Thief. I had some quite nasty characters in there, and they were racist, and it suited the purpose sort of quite well. But yeah, like you said, though, most people would have been, you know, and that's just the way it was. And but yeah, it suited all the villains. I didn't have to try very hard, you know. But it's great. I really like writing bad guys. Anyway, you know, I like writing the baddies.
Before we go on to your baddies, I was going to ask you all if you'd researched like the language of the time that you wrote. Do you use any specific kind of slang or like words from the era to make it a bit more authentic?
I just use I just listen to my grandma talking to me in my head, and she always says I and ye. Not always, but so that's all I do really. Make it sound what we would think would be 18th century language, and I hope the best.
Yeah. It's definitely. I mean, like I find if you read some of the, is it Wuthering Heights, where there's the butler, the Yorkshire butler, and it's so hard to read because she's written it all phonetically.
Yeah.
You're supposed to hear in your head like this Yorkshire, but it just doesn't come for me anyway. And I'm sure it's but it just doesn't come out, and it's just hard.
Yeah.
So I think like the odd one is all right if you can set that odd word in, but otherwise the reader's got an imagination. You know, they don't need us to.
Definitely.
You know. Yeah. The one thing I do try and do is delete any modern words that I spot that shouldn't really be in there, because that's quite easy to do.
Yeah.
I would say my larger problem is that obviously I'm Scottish, and my characters are in Bloomsbury in London. And if you're Scottish, you do use certain different words, but we also have a slightly different grammar, and that can be trickier for me to kind of correct the grammar to be for Londoners. So actually, that probably causes me more problems than the historical part is the Scottish part.
Why did you choose to set it in London then and not up in Scotland?
Well, it was because I wanted to use this real life person, this American guy who was living in London at the time. But I do have one set up at Loch Ness because I wanted to use Aleister Crowley, who was up there and is credited with inventing the Loch Ness Monster. So they do go up to Loch Ness, and then I get to do all my Scottish stuff. So that's lovely. But yeah, the rest of the time it has to be set in London and Bloomsbury, which is in the 1920s is such an exciting place anyway. The third book has Virginia Woolf in it, and so there's all this kind of fun stuff that you can do with these famous figures that were around at the time. So I guess the other option would maybe have been Edinburgh, was quite a good kind of fun place in the 1920s as well, but maybe that could be the next series, I don't know.
I'm intrigued. Normally I get everyone to introduce their main character, but because of what Guy was saying about writing villains, can you all introduce us to like without giving away a spoiler, introduce us to some of the bad guys in your books? Obviously don't tell us who the main like baddie is if it gives everything away. But
I can do one. I'll do the one that was most fun to write in The Apprentice Thief. So this young lad, that they go to a poorhouse. I don't know how much you know about it, but basically they weren't prisons, poorhouses, but you sort of ended up very hard to get away from them once you were in. And this guy, Ephraim Moss, he's kind of like pseudo-religious. He likes to quote the Bible, but he doesn't really know anything about it, but he just enjoys quoting it. He's absolutely horrible. And he steals all the sort of alms that rich people sort of bring to the gates. He sort of steals, and he drinks all the port. And this lad, Sebi, sort of finds out, and it's really marked his card. So after that, Moss is sort of after him, and he ends up sort of having a big sort of fight with him. But he was great because he had no qualms. You know, this lad is like 14. He had absolutely no qualms about trying to sort of kill him. And before that, making his life an absolute hell. And he was great. I really enjoyed writing him. I think we do, don't we? We just like the baddies. You know, it's just good fun to get that side out. And I'll go on. Someone else do one.
Well, the majority of my baddies are like rich people.
Yeah,
that's really cliched, I know. You know, so all the sort of gentry toffs are baddies, basically.
Yeah.
Not all of them. Some of them are okay, but and I realize that's the sort of a stereotype, but it was kind of true, you know. They had everything, and the people working the fields didn't have anything. So yeah, they're always the rich guys are the baddies. They're usually sort of horrible and conceited and selfish, and the working class poor people like Dick Turpin himself is a poor working lad with broken hands and a strong back, and he's virtuous against this evil. And people have I've had reviews on the book saying it's sort of like pushing socialism back into the 18th century, and maybe it wasn't like that. Maybe the poor didn't mind where they were. I don't know, but yeah, it's easy for me to use baddies who are rich, and I guess that's what I've fallen into, really.
Yeah, I think I do similar. That the baddie being the abuser of power, so not necessarily rich, but I have a few that are in like the civil service, so they can cover up whatever they're getting up to, because they're in the civil service. I've also got a few that are baddies sort of through no fault of their own because of their war experiences. So people that have been kind of severely changed by war, and then obviously make bad choices. But there's kind of that, and again, it's that 1920s thing of you've got that opportunity. You've got a whole generation of men who went through this kind of ordeal, and some of them came back in better states than others. So yeah, there's definitely the echo of that, I think, in all my books as well.
That's very interesting that you have baddies that it's not really their fault as well. That's interesting because you can really understand a character like that who's just been put into a bad situation and through no fault of his own he's horrible.
Yeah, totally. I think it's that thing of the baddie doesn't realize they're the baddie. The baddie thinks that they're the protagonist of their own story, right? So yeah, your baddie, that's how it's kind of believable, I suppose, isn't it? That's how we try and get a believable baddie.
Agreed.
So I was talking to Jonathan Hall last night, and he was saying that one of his next books, he's murdering someone and they might be an Ofsted inspector, and he used to be a teacher. So I think that's maybe like a bit of kind of professional sort of relief in fiction form. Have you ever kind of murdered off, like killed someone or made someone a villain who's like something that you really don't like in kind of real life?
For sure. I mean, yeah, things always work out in my books. People get what they deserve. The goodies always do okay, and the baddies always get it in the neck in some form. And that's it's the world I can control. And I guess you're the same, Tanya, with cozy crime as well. Yeah,
absolutely. What I like is the kind of slightly cheeky characters, because then they can say the sort of stuff that you would like to say to people, whether they're the villains or not. The people that just say what they think. That's quite nice. And I'm also a lot wittier on the page than I am in real life. So I've got really good, funny comebacks and stuff. The sort of thing you think about a week later. Oh yeah, that would have been great at the time. So have I killed off anyone? Not that I would admit to, but they're all fictional characters. No relation to anyone living, as they say.
Absolutely. My character in the mirror game, Harry, he gets he's got a few problems which he gradually gets over, but one of them is addicted to laudanum and alcohol. So he makes so pretty much when he's in a state, he pretty much says whatever's on his mind, and that was great. I really enjoyed that.
Do you what are you all working on at the moment? What you're writing currently, or just finished, maybe?
I'm doing well. I've just finished. I've just finished one which is Complete Departure, so a psychological thriller which I haven't tried before, but it's about father and daughter who get they're on sort of holiday in Austria, and they basically get trapped in this World War II airbase with another sort of couple. And things get sort of pretty bad. So it's no sort of escape novel, but I really, really, really enjoyed writing. I wrote it in about 4 weeks, actually, because it was just sort of 4 people, so it's sort of fairly easy to control everything. And I say control, pretty much just let the characters go and see what happened. But so that was a lot of fun to do that. and one I'm working on at the moment, which it's weird because I don't see it being more than a novella. I don't see it more than about 90 pages. But about a year ago, I had this really strong impression of, for want of a better word, because I see things quite, I don't know how you guys do, maybe we'll talk about that in a minute, but I sort of see pictures quite vividly and characters. And I saw this old woman in, again, 1920s London, sitting by a fire, and she couldn't quite remember how to light it. She'd obviously sort of had some sort of memory problem. And someone comes to visit her and she doesn't know who it is, and she's trying to work it out. And that's as much of the story as I got. But it won't leave me alone. And so I'm sort of trying to finish that at the moment. And it sort of goes back through her life. It sort of swaps between her trying to work out who this person is who's come to visit, and he doesn't give anything away, and what led her to be there from the time that she was sort of younger. So I don't know what will happen. I've got a fair idea now, but it's really, I'm really enjoying it, and I'm going to try and finish it over Christmas if possible. But that's where I am at the moment.
Is it a real air base that you've used?
No, I completely made it up. Yeah, utterly. It was going to be on Dartmoor, and then I thought I just fancied something a bit more glamorous, so I decided to make it Austria instead. And but yeah, it's all totally made up. Yeah.
Good.
Fair enough. Tanya, what are you working on at the moment?
I've actually, for the last year, I've been writing contemporary novels, not historical. It's been quite nice not to do the research. It's been lovely, actually. But I'm going to go back and do another historical next year. I think for any series, I like to have 3. It feels more, I like to do a trilogy in any series. So I'd like to do a 3rd Rennie Bryan one. So another London kind of I think I'm up to about 1926 now. So yeah, and obviously because I've written a couple in that series now, the research is a little bit less. I kind of know what's happening now with those books. So hopefully there'll be one sometime, maybe in the summer. We'll see.
I've just released The Crown, my Christmas novella set in 1721, where Dick Turpin invents Yorkshire puddings. I just told you about that. I've just finished that. I've also just finished my contemporary book as well, Avenue Cars 2, a gangland thriller set in Hull in a taxi office. But next year I'll be writing a World War One seafaring novel. Hull is famous for its seafaring stories, and it's got a huge history of proud seamanship that is just largely forgotten, even by the residents here. So I wrote a book called The North Sea Tale, which is all about the trawling industry in the 70s, and the research, and it just opened my eyes to the history of where I live. And so I'm writing a World War One trawler versus a German U-boat story. I'll be doing that in the next couple of months. But there's some great stories around this part of the world that nobody knows about, including the residents. So it's important for me to get these stories and keep them for my children and for this area, to celebrate the area and what happened. I've already got some great characters on the ship. If you've read North Sea Tale, it'll be a bit like that with some different characters, but things won't be the same. They'll be hunted across the Barents Sea by a German U-boat intent on their destruction, and they're a trawling vessel from Hull with some of the worst sailors you can ever imagine. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
And the thing is that probably might have happened, I don't know, but there's a lot of really kind of scary trawling stories, isn't there?
Oh mate, yeah, it just goes on and on and on. I mean, just being out there just being out there would be bad enough for me,
I'm so impressed you would even tackle military history. That seems like another level of research and things, because there's so much about it. Okay, so you're looking at the trawlermen then.
Yeah, they're trawlermen. I mean, they did get requisitioned to become like fighting ships, but mine will just be an actual trawler. It's too heavy for me.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's hard work.
Oh boy, yeah, that's no.
And you are holding yourself up. Sorry, go on.
No, go on, carry on.
No, I was going to say if you start like titling say military history, then you are holding yourself up, then, aren't you? It's got to be. There's not too much bending of rules there.
Oh yeah.
But there are some crackingly amazing, sort of creepy places that you can set that have got a bit of a military thing to them, haven't there? Like I've been doing a topic about military use of waves with my kids at school, and I went back and found them pictures of like the base I was born at, and they were just like, that is terrifying because it's like just abandoned now, and they were like, that's really creepy and awful. It's kind of really interesting to go back and look at them, and I think like some of them would make really great kind of crime scene places now. Even if you didn't delve into the military history, I bet there's a lot of those kind of places that make good locations.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were saying, Guy, is it like an abandoned airfield or something that you're using for your thriller? There is something quite spooky about these kind of places.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I looked again. I did the same thing with the World War II sort of Air Force base. That I looked at a few abandoned ones. I wanted to actually go around a few, but I didn't sort of have the time. So, but I had a good look online. There's loads of pictures, and there's all these sort of empty rooms with, some of them still with paperwork in, and desks. It's brilliant. As soon as you get into that, there's just stories there. It's almost sort of all there sort of for you, really. A bicycle propped up against a building was last used, in the Second World War, all that sort of stuff. It was great. And then add to that the snow. They get snowed in. It was awesome, really. It was great fun. I like location. For me, I almost think about that first. A sort of setting, and then the characters come from there. I don't know how you guys do it, but it's really important for me. If I don't have a location, I find it hard to think of anything else.
Would you go around to the location, Guy, and have a look at it?
I definitely would. Yeah, I was purely just pressed for time. Otherwise, and I still may between first and second draft, if I can get up to one of those places and have a good look round. It would be brilliant. I think it would really add to it.
Yeah, I mean, I often, because all my books are set in East Yorkshire where I live, so I will often push bike the ways that the guys travel on in the books, or run it, just to sort of get a feel of how it is, and the kind of the things that they see. Because if you go to the wild parts of East Yorkshire, they're probably much the same, 300 years ago or what. So, yeah. Do you visit the places that you set your books, Tania?
Not really, not for the London ones, not for the historicals. Thank goodness for Google Maps, and thank goodness for the internet. I mean, our lives would have been so much harder work before the internet.
Oh, yeah.
You can go and watch Pathé films from the 1920s and literally see what people walked like and see how they moved and things. And it does make life so much easier than having to just imagine it. But no, those ones are set in London. So I've been to London, but probably not intensively enough to understand. But I can go and Google Street View the street that people lived in and get a sense of it anyway. Yeah. Obviously, it'd be better to visit the flesh, but it's not always possible.
You can't though, can you? Really, not always.
Obviously London changed a lot, so you're not really visiting 1920s London anyway, I guess.
Yeah. There was a writer, I can't remember his name now. He wrote a really good book called Spangle, which is a sort of 800-page story about this circus traveling the America just after the Civil War. And it starts off as what they used to call a mud show, real basic. And it builds up into this sort of amazing circus. And it's a great story. But he was actually known for... He joined the circus, and spent 2 years going around. And I thought, God, yeah, that does seem like a sort of a thing a writer should do. He actually joined the circus, and then he wrote one called Aztec, and he lived in, Peru for like 5 years, and I feel a bit guilty when I think, yeah, I should probably do that,
Like a method writer. So that means you need to go out on a trawler, Chris.
Oh well, yeah, I know. I would do if they let me. I would do it, but They don't do it anymore. They used to let you go, but not anymore.
Yeah, health and safety.
And there's none of them left either. There's none of the old style trawlers that your dad went on, Kaz. They're all gone now.
Yeah, I think there's one that isn't there still one that you can visit in Hull.
Yeah, you can go walk around on it, but it's certainly it's never going to sail again.
No, it's not going to sail.
Yeah, you can walk around on it. It's lovely.
You can walk around one, can't you? Like, it's close. I think I've been on there with my dad.
The Arctic Corsair. They're revamping it right now.
But yeah, sorry, my dad set up the group, and he used to work on trawlers back in the day. Which I think he discovered the North Sea tale years ago, didn't he? He was a really big fan of it, but because it was a world he's familiar with.
Well, I need to talk to him about steam trawlers as well, because he's been on one. I mean, that's his trip was on a steam trawler in the 50s, wasn't it, or 60s?
60s it will have been, I would have thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, it will have been. So yeah, drop him a message. I
will do. I tried to speak to him in Leeds, but he was busy. He was chatting to people.
Probably. He does do that. While we're on the sort of settings and things like that, I'm going to divert us away from talking about your books for a bit and ask you what your reads of the year have been. What is going to sound really, and I need to tell you this, Chris, while you're here. Someone I interviewed earlier in the week said your book was their read of the year.
Oh wow, that's so nice of them. Who were they?
It was T.G. Campbell. She said was one of her reads of the year. So, what is everybody's reads of the year?
Oh,
put you all on the spot.
Put me all. Yeah. I think the Essex Serpent, maybe for me. I don't know if you know that one, but it's I can't. It's so good. I now can't think of who. I'm terrible with names, but it'll come to me in a minute. But it's basically about again set in the 1890s. This lady basically wants to become an archaeologist. Obviously, pretty hard at the time, but she finds a way to do it, and she goes after this. She ends up looking for this Essex serpent, sort of mysterious sort of creature that's been seen in the marshes. And so it's a love story, basically. It's really, really, really good. And I think it has been adapted now for BBC, which probably will also be really good. But I love her writing so much that I'm going to look it up on my phone. I'm going to cheat. Sarah Perry, that's it. I've got it, Sarah Perry. And that's probably my number one book, I think, of the year.
Nice. Anyone else got a number one book of the year?
I've been a terrible reader this year, Kaz. Honestly, I'm dreadful at reading. I write loads and loads and loads and loads, and I don't read as much as I should. So, I mean, what I do basically is I've got a few standard books that I just go back and copy, and it's always Cannery Row by John Steinbeck.
Yeah,
and I sort of pull it apart and copy that. So that's kind of like my Bible, really. I don't know, Kaz, you don't like John Steinbeck, do you? But I love him, and his character. Even now, I mean, he wrote in the 1920s as well, or just after, and so yeah, I'm terrible for reading new stuff. I really want to, and I download it and I get it, and then I just don't.
Cannery Row is great. I love that book. That's my favourite of his. Yeah.
We're all going to have to agree to disagree on John Steinbeck.
I'm not a massive Steinbeck person, but that might be post-traumatic stress from studying him at school. So, you always think the authors you learn at school, don't you?
Yeah.
But I don't know. I haven't really read any historicals this year, but I've read pretty much everything that Cleve McDonald puts out. So he has the kind of fantasy stuff, which is Stranger Times series. And the crime books are A Man with One of Those Faces. Irish crime, very funny, very kind of Irish sense of humour. So I would really recommend his stuff. I think he's in this group as well. But I tend to read, again, because I write cozies, a lot of cozies, and you can read them one after another in a like a kind of binge way because they're so light. So yeah, I've read all of Janice Hallett's ones this year as well. A very good. She was speaking earlier, I think. So it's a time of year for cozy mysteries, isn't it? You want to just chill out and have a nice little crime to solve.
Even Sam's picking on me now. She says, I love Of Mice and Men, Kaz does not.
I love Mice and Men. It's a great book.
It is post-traumatic stress from school. I read it about 30 times at school because I kept getting bored and reading ahead. In like the lesson, because it took so long to read it, I got bored and read ahead, and I must have read the same book. I read the same book about 30 times, and I hated it the first time. It didn't.
Are there any books from school that you love still?
I still love Shakespeare, weirdly. I think school's quite good for introducing you to Shakespeare. You would never go and pick up a Shakespeare play, but you get sort of forced into it, don't you? So I really enjoyed that. Sorry, what was the one you said? I didn't catch it.
To Kill a Mockingbird.
Ah.
I think I like Shakespeare from teaching it, actually. So when I became a teacher, I taught English for a bit, very badly, because that's not my specialism. But I really enjoyed teaching Shakespeare. And when I was at school, Wuthering Heights is my favourite book of all time. And we read Wuthering Heights when I was at school.
Great book.
I translated the Yorkshire book a bit for the people because I was in school in Midlands.
Made it easier, yeah. I'm trying to think. I don't actually remember being made to read any books, but we read that play Equus. I remember doing that. Have you ever read that? It's a bit weird. About someone murdering horses. I remember being forced to do that, and that was pretty horrendous. But I always love reading, so it wasn't a problem. I just read anyway, you know. But yeah, we had, maybe it was just the school I was at. They were into plays. I remember doing a couple, but it didn't resonate at the time the same way that books did. You know, I just didn't. If I'd have seen one, that would have probably been better.
Yeah.
Reading them, it's a bit dry, you know.
Yeah. Hard.
Yeah, hard going.
I also had. Sorry, I was going to say I had North of Scotland teachers, so that was always a bit challenging because North of Scotland teachers in the 90s were quite conservative. So we used to read books and they wouldn't read out any content that they didn't like, so they used to skip parts. But that sort of was quite exciting as well, because then we would go and find out which bits they were skipping, you know. And when we discovered all the swears in Shakespeare that they wouldn't read out, that was quite exciting as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. A friend of mine is from Sheffield, and they got to read a great book, A Kestrel for a Knave by Barry Hines, who's been into that film Kes. And they loved it. You know, they would get to read the swears as well, and they thought it was great.
Yeah.
I wish we'd read that at school.
That seems to be a thing that gets read at school up here a lot, isn't it? Like, I know people who've went to school up in Yorkshire and read Kes.
Yeah, South Yorkshire, isn't it? Yeah.
I wonder if it's just a Yorkshire thing. Like, if you're at school up in Yorkshire, you get to read Kes, but nowhere else.
Yeah, not in East Yorkshire. We wouldn't read it. Yeah, I know that anyone from Sheffield around that way, Barnsley and stuff, they all definitely have to read it at school. It's like biblical for those guys.
Yeah, it's part of the history of being up here, I guess. Sam says she loves Kes. Someone here has said they can't stand Shakespeare because of schools. That they like Lord of the Flies and Dracula. It's probably whoever taught you, though, isn't it? I think a lot of it is down to the teachers. You have to blame teachers for a lot of people not liking books. Maybe that's why I hate Steinbeck. She says, with two teachers on the panel, I've just insulted like half of us. So we had your recommendations for the year. I know I've put you on the spot. I'm sorry about that, but we like to ask everybody their top books. Oh, Sam says she's still in touch with her English teacher.
Oh,
still having an impact on them to this day.
Wow,
that's lovely.
Is there anyone who you think, apart from like authors, obviously, who's been a big influence on your writing?
My father-in-law. He's like a builder. He just gets jobs done. And that's kind of what I learned from him, right? You start a job and you finish it, and that's it. And so that was really a big breakthrough for me, because I used to start things and never finish them. And, you know, he sort of instilled into me that, if you're going to start a job, you're going to have to finish it. And I think that's the most important thing about being a writer. You've got to finish your jobs. And a lot of people start and they don't finish. And then, if you don't finish the thing, even if it's bad, as long as you finish. So that's someone who helped me out a lot.
Yeah, that's so true. How many of us have half-finished books sitting about, but it's getting that first book finished is just such a massive milestone. It's so important.
Yeah.
I'm going to say for who's influenced me, I'm going to say my kids, because I wrote my first book on maternity leave, and it was out of sheer desperation at having something to do that wasn't child-related and that wasn't, watching Paw Patrol and doing cartoons and stuff for kids. And that's why I started writing, really, was to have something adult to kind of escape to. So I think reading's escapism, but writing's probably escapism as well, in a way. We shut ourselves in our rooms and we get our writing done. So yeah, in a kind of weird way, the kids were definitely an influence in that way.
Yeah. I think I've been influenced a lot by sort of quotes from people. Like I think Harper Lee said, part of being a writer is just sitting alone day after day, even if you think you can't do it, and still doing it, and still getting book finished. And I thought, yeah, that's really good, because we all have that on a daily basis. You just think, I can't do this. What am I even doing? I'm not worthy of all that, goes on. And and someone else, I can't remember who it was, said a similar thing. The art of writing is sitting down and getting on with it, and that's it. So I find sort of quotes like that, quite an inspiration, really. That it is that. It's not so much looking out the window and, noticing a drop of water catch the light. Oh, yeah, and, that's just rubbish. It's just sitting down and getting on with it, isn't it? And even if it's horrendous, to just banging away, until it's done. So yeah, I've got lots of little quotes like that tend to pop into my head, sort of see me through.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Before we wrap up and recap all of your books, have you got any events coming up in the new year? Anyone going out to do any author events or chats or anything?
I'm going to go on the radio this week to talk to the whole FM, I think, and I've got to take my guitar as well, so that should be scary. I guess you'll be doing gigs as well, Guy, yeah?
Yeah, the odd one, not so much now, but I do, the odd performance here and there, but they're few and far between these days, to be honest. But I'm doing an event in March as part of with Donna Morfitt, part of her crime panel, which I've just done one in Brighton. It's really, really good. She did an absolutely brilliant job. And we're doing another one. We're not quite sure where yet. So the Brighton was the dark side of Brighton. So at the moment, this is the dark side of ... So we see where it sort of pitches up, but it's really good. It'll be a day of panels, and it's great fun. So that'll be in March. I'm not quite sure of the date. Hopefully she knows. If she's watching, she may even put it up. But something like the 23rd.
We'll see if she updates us. What about you, Tanya? What are you doing?
I've got a new book, so I'm just still on the new book in February, and I can't think about anything else till that's done. So that's the plan.
Nice. For the UK Crime Book Club, we've got our live event in June as well, up in Leeds, which is always a good event. Well, the one time we've had it was a good event, wasn't it, Chris?
It was a good event. It was great.
So hopefully it'll be fun again this year. When we repeat it, panels are looking good so far. We've got 5 minutes left, so you've had lots of comments from people who are watching. So remind them, because we've sort of had you introduce yourselves at the beginning, but remind them what they're going to go away and buy. Maybe show them a book tell them what the first one in the series is so that they've got some Christmas shopping to do?
I have gone onto the loft to find a book to show you, actually. So there we are. This is my first ever book, The Paranormal Investigations of Mr. Charles Fort. But if you search for me on Amazon, it's T.E. Scott, crime novels. And if you like slightly weird crime, it's a bit of a strange book. You'll enjoy it. People kind of either love it or hate it. It's because it's kind of has this real person called Charles Fort, and he's a very eccentric, love it or hate it character. But if you like the kind of 1920s crazy thing, I'd give him a try. Somebody else can promote now.
This is my book, The Crown. It's a tiny novella. It's not as big as my normal books. They only cost 99p on Amazon at the moment. It's set in 1721, Christmas Day, in the Half Moon pub in Skidby, and a young Dick Turpin invents Yorkshire puddings and solves a crime.
Nice. I've got two novels. I haven't got them with me to show, unfortunately. But the first one, The Mirror Game, is 1920s, maybe slightly darker detective novel. So if you get Tania's and you get mine, that's a really good balance, I think. About this guy who comes back. He's a private detective. He comes back from the trenches. He's just sort of trying to make his way through life, and he comes across a man who was supposedly dead and has miraculously come to life again. It appears in this London cafe, and it doesn't quite add up, and that sort of opens the whole story. The second one, The Apprentice Thief, set in 1890s. That's about a boy who, through various events, he starts off living on the sort of Norfolk barges, pretty idyllic life. He ends up having to move to London with his mother, and they go to a poorhouse. And the only way he can get out of that is to learn to be a criminal, basically, and pick locks and rob people's houses. And it's kind of a coming-of-age story. His mother disappears, and he has to try and find her, and it takes him across the globe to India. Yeah, that's that. Sounds one.
Good.
Like that.
Sounds good. Were Yorkshire puddings invented in East Yorkshire, Chris?
Yeah. No, they were actually, the first mention is a woman called Hannah Glass. I think she wrote a book called The Art of Housekeeping in 1847, and she had the first recipe for Yorkshire puddings. So in the book, Hannah is at that pub, and she learns to cook Yorkshire puddings from a young Dick Turpin. So that's how I got around it.
Nice.
Of course they were invented in East Yorkshire. Where do you think they were invented?
Knowing our luck, probably nowhere in Yorkshire at all.
I tried really hard to get them to get someone in my books to invent sausage rolls, but I just couldn't get it in. I maybe will. I don't know.
I'm sure you will.
I'd like to,
A bit more northern things to be invented. Yeah. Thank you so much, everybody, for taking part today.
Pleasure.
Well, thank you for having us.
Thank you very much for having us, Kaz.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, it's been really good fun. Thank you.